My family are all absolute geniuses. My father is a financial tycoon. My mother is a wealthy actress. My 4-year-old brother organized a solo art exhibition. As for me, I only know that I always wonder why my whole family is so outstanding. Only I am a useless person. Until one day, a genius girl famous on the internet suddenly came to the door, saying that I was not my parents' biological child, that she was the real lady who was mistakenly given to me. Very good. Finally, I don't have to struggle anymore. The heart that hung in limbo for so many years finally died. Since childhood, I always felt like I didn't belong in this family. My father has been in the financial world for 3 years, and I can't even add and subtract within 100. My mother possesses world-class beauty, and I am just an ordinary person to the point of mediocrity. My brother is perfect in all aspects: moral, intellectual, physical, artistic, labor, mastered nothing. At the age of 4, he held a personal exhibition. At the age of 8, he entered the Northern Youth class, and at the age of 15, he was listed in the top 10 most handsome faces in the world. And I can only quietly leave in the dark. But in the end, I chose to make peace with myself and live day by day without sitting around. After all, the ancestors' graves cannot smoke green forever. Until the genius girl who became famous on the internet came to her door. The nurse that year also personally admitted that when she gave birth to me and her, I was the real eldest lady of the family. How could such an ordinary girl be her parents' daughter? Today I must take back everything that belongs to me. Thien came alone, but the atmosphere was like there was a whole group of people with empty backs. Dad said coldly, "Why did you give it to me by mistake?" My mother called out and replied, "How do I know? After giving birth, I only worry about counting the D marks." His brother's face stiffened. He was silent for 3 seconds, then coldly said, "I was only 3 years old at that time." I sat like a needle under the chair. Thien's face was not much better. She couldn't help but stand up, interrupting her parents and brother. "Mom, Dad, look at my face, then look at her. You and I are a family, right?" She pointed straight at me, sitting on the sofa. I touched my normal face and nodded in agreement. From childhood to adulthood, my brother always received countless compliments, saying he was handsome, just like a bastard drawn from you. What about me? Just one sentence. This girl is well raised, feeling so sad. Thien continued to present evidence. From childhood to adulthood, I was an excellent student, but for her, I heard that she always ranked last, and even had to buy a college degree. Hearing that, I bowed my head in shame. Since school, my brother has always been absolute first, and I have always been unconditionally bottom. The teacher was not willing to open a private tutoring class for me. As a result, the pressure on her brain was so great that she was admitted to the ICU. Before she fell into a coma, she still held my hand tightly, constantly asking, "Are you and your brother really blood relatives?" I feel extremely guilty. After that shock, I was determined to change. The night before the exam, I hung my head on the beam, stuck a needle in my thigh, and stayed up all night studying. I have memorized an entire math book. As a result, I became the first person to completely write on the exam paper, but still got 0 points. Thanks to that, I am famous throughout school. Thinking of this, I turned to look at my parents and brother with a serious expression. Could it be that my parents and I are actually one family? His parents fell into deep contemplation. His brother remained silent and did not speak. Thien was still unwilling and shouted, "Mom, Dad, why don't you believe that I'm your biological daughter? I've been wandering outside for 18 years, and it was very difficult to return. How can you not believe in me?" The atmosphere became more and more tense. At this time, Aunt Vong, the maid, standing in the dark corner, spoke up, "Sir, Master, Miss, actually now there is something called DNA testing." The testing process went very smoothly, but the results took a month to come back. Thien was unhappy and immediately made a fuss with the testing staff. "Why wait a month?" The staff patiently explained, "Line up in normal order, and you will have to wait." She was so angry that she stomped her foot. "Do you know who I am? On what basis do you dare to talk to me like that?" The employee just looked at her with an expressionless expression, completely ignoring her aggressive attitude. I stood next to him and looked until my toes curled up in embarrassment. Gradually, many curious people gathered around to watch. "What's going on?" I couldn't bear to look at her anymore, so I walked over and grabbed her hand, quietly advising her. Come on, just wait a month, it's not that long. But before I could finish my sentence, Thien violently pushed my hand away and Han Hok shouted, Shut up. Of course you want to extend the time for another month, but I don't. I absolutely will not give you the opportunity to continue taking over my identity. After saying that, she angrily grabbed the testing staff's collar, stepped forward and ordered, I demand that you give me the results today, otherwise you will bear the consequences. As a result, Thien was detained for 3 days for disturbing order. 3 days later, she came to the family's door again. This time she asked to move in with us. The reason is, I want to feel the love of my family that I have been deprived of for so many years. My father looked at her coldly, my mother remained silent, and Aunt Vong quietly retreated back. On the contrary, Thien's eyes were red, and she was so happy that she cried. Your parents definitely believe me, right? That's so good. She deliberately raised her voice, then glanced at me provocatively, emphasizing each word. From now on, I will make up for all the gaps in this family. I turned away, trying to suppress my expression, not wanting to reveal any emotion. Compensating for family feelings. Since I have memory, every morning I wake up in a 500 square meters room, sit at an 8 m long dining table, and eat meals with a few maids and 2 Doberman dogs. In my family's yard, except for Aunt Vong, Uncle Tran, the housekeeper, and my brother who came home on the weekend, there was no one else. Loneliness, cold, and emptiness were the hallmarks of my childhood. As a teenager, I used to have a special hobby, raising my head at a 45-degree angle to look at the sky, fully acting in a sad youthful style, then posting poetic status lines online. Money cannot buy love and care. Those who understand don't need to ask. Those who don't understand, asking is useless. Of course, this game of pretense ended one New Year's Eve. At that time, I was having dinner with my family. The brother suddenly took out his phone, opened a huge screenshot, printed it on the poster, and hung it right on the wall. The photo is one of my lazy statuses and has now become a bedside slogan. From then on, I never dared to recall that embarrassing moment again. I glanced at Thien and then gently shed a tear of sympathy. She will definitely be disappointed. But it seemed my mother was extremely excited. She smiled brightly and applauded. You're right. I also want to make up for the past hurts. Then she held Thien's hand, her eyes bright like a beautiful little girl. This way, I will definitely turn you into the most perfect princess in the world. As soon as I heard that sentence, my brother and I almost simultaneously took a step back. His eyes were complicated. He wanted to say something, but didn't. But when I saw my mother happily pulling Thien's hand up the stairs, my brother and I could only silently exchange glances. In the end, decided not to speak up. Mom has a lot of beautiful clothes. No one has worn it before, but I finally found the right person. If you like me, you can be my model for the rest of my life. So less than half an hour later, Thien was given a makeover from head to toe by my mother. At lunch that day, the dining table still had 4 people. Me, my brother, my mother, and the girl who had just been turned into a dopamine doll. On her body was a gorgeous outfit, studded with sparkling jewelry, and on her head was a crown as high as an 8-layer cake layer. Not a high-class hat, but literally tall. I looked at her quietly, then looked at the thick makeup on her face that looked like a ghost girl from a medieval horror story. My heart suddenly felt an indescribable sadness. From childhood to adulthood, my mother, an international beauty queen, always had the dream of turning her daughter into the perfect doll. But unfortunately, I was born too normal and lazy, disappointing her time and time again. As for my brother, although he has excellent talent, his temperament is completely inherited from his father, a cold-blooded financial tycoon. From a young age, he knew how to overwhelm people with his eyes. Every time my mother intended to turn him into some romantic image, just one cold look from him made her give up. But I know my mother never really gave up. Over the years, she has bought countless dolls, and even used her father's name to order a real-life silicone doll. This story was also reported in the newspaper with the headline, "The tycoon's wife is so infatuated with dolls that she spends a fortune to make replica models." I withdrew my thoughts and turned to look at Thien. She was forced to wear a dress that was so tight at the waist that she couldn't sit down and could only eat standing up. When she tried to reach for food, the 8-tiered crown on her head began to sway, making her not dare to bend down. My brother coldly said, "It's not your birth shape. Why do you need to put up a Christmas tree?" I don't laugh often, unless I can't help it. My mother was not happy when she heard that and immediately objected. "It looks beautiful, but doesn't it look just like a doll?" My brother blinked his peachy eyes, his tone indifferent. "The doll doesn't need to breathe, but she's about to suffocate." My mother felt a little guilty and turned to look at Thien, but at this time her face was pale. Clearly she was tied up so tightly that she couldn't breathe. But facing my mother's rare concerned eyes, she still tried to force a stiff smile. No, I feel fine." I couldn't bear it and kindly reminded, "Don't try too hard." But she didn't appreciate it and instead teased me. "What do you know? A parent's love for their daughter is as heavy as a mountain." As soon as he finished speaking, a cracking sound echoed in the air. After that, Thien's expression distorted, her body began to tremble violently, and then, thud. Under the weight of the 8-tiered crown, she lost her balance and fell straight to the ground, making a shattering sound. What followed was chaos. Dishes and dishes crashed. The maid ran to help. My mother hugged her head and screamed, and I quietly put my chopsticks on the table. Indeed, a parent's love is as heavy as a mountain. Thien was hospitalized for a few days. When she returned, my father had just flown home. I stood still and looked at her, her whole body wrapped in bandages like a mummy, being carefully helped upstairs by her parents. After that, I raised my head, maintaining the 45-degree angle, looking at the sky in deep contemplation. Aunt Vong walked to the side and said softly, "Miss, don't think too much. After all, you have lived in the family for 18 years. She gently placed a towel on my shoulders. Her tone seemed comforting. I turned my head to look at her seriously, then nodded and said, "Auntie Vong, I've thought about it carefully. The nurse who used to make porridge between me and Thien is definitely a master." Aunt Vong was stunned, her eyes somewhat confused. I patted her shoulder and continued to slowly say, "She must have calculated that Thien was at odds with the family. If she hadn't changed places, would she have been able to live until today?" Auntie Vong's eyes widened. Her face looked like she had heard the wildest story in the world. I sighed. "I've only been home twice, and it's already like this. If she really stayed here for 18 years, she might have been reincarnated in another life by now." After a few days of recuperation, Thien finally began to realize a terrifying truth. At lunch that day, she slammed her chopsticks down on the table and stared at me. "Why do I only see you every day?" I bowed my head, slowly scooped a spoonful of soup, and calmly replied, "Because today is not the weekend." She frowned, not understanding. "What about the weekend?" I took a sip of soup, thought, and nonchalantly replied, "On the weekend, you can see 2 more people, your parents." Thien's face darkened. "So what about weekdays?" I looked at the bowl of soup, pretending to be curious. Depending on their work schedule, maybe they will be in Turkey or France, Tokyo or Paris." She was silent for a few seconds, then got angry. "Are you crazy? What the hell is Turkey and Paris? Did you read the lyrics?" I shrugged, looking reluctant. "I'm just telling the truth. After all, Dad is a financial tycoon, and Mom is an international beauty queen. It's normal for them to fly everywhere." But clearly Thien cannot accept this truth. She stared at me, her eyes full of frustration. Then her eyes turned red, looking just like the little dog Tew hack that I picked up when I first brought it home. It also has the same resentful appearance, but with just a toy ball it immediately becomes happy and runs all over the yard. I tilted my head, thought, and asked tentatively, "Or should you follow me? I can show you how to live here." As a result, Thien burst into tears on the spot. I don't know how she did it, but that night, my parents and brother all returned. For the first time in 18 years, I witnessed the whole family gathered in the living room, 3 adults, 2 maids, and 2 dogs pumping air, solemnly like a high-level conference. Thien opened. "Mom, Dad, I want to become your real daughter." My parents glanced at each other. My mother picked up the calendar, flipped a few pages, and asked, "Is the DNA assessment report out yet?" Star. I looked at the clock and raised my eyebrows. That fast? I feel like I just stepped out of the lab yesterday. My father frowned, bowed his head, and opened the laptop. His eyes were full of murderous intent. It's been a month and the big projects still haven't been finalized? The planning department is a bunch of useless people. My brother looked expressionless and leisurely added, actually, it's only been 3 days, 18 hours and 37 minutes. Parents simultaneously put down the documents and breathed a sigh of relief. As for Du Nuoc Tin, it almost completely collapsed. She cried out angrily, Dad, Mom, I've worked hard to come back. I want to shoulder the responsibilities of the family's daughter, not like her who just knows how to do nothing. Having finished speaking, she pointed straight at me. My brother tilted his head slightly, glanced at her, and replied faintly, You mean you want to be the heir? His cold, sharp eyes made her feel a little guilty, but she still tried to regain her composure. The children of the family are all the same. I just want to share the burden, like my brother. I also want to become the pride of my parents. She tried to appear sincere and continued, Brother, since I was little, I have always considered you my ideal role model. Please give me a chance to prove myself. I couldn't help but laugh, then quickly covered my mouth and pretended to cough twice. Aunt Vong and Uncle Tran standing behind me also quickly reminded me. I immediately retracted my smile and obediently bowed my head. Du Nuoc Tin continued to cry and talk about her lonely years, about how much she longed for love. The painful tone made my mother emotional and shed tears. Old too, she just wants to feel love. My father was still frowning, his aura full of majesty, but at this moment, my brother spoke up. I have no opinion. With just one sentence, my father immediately nodded. Okay. Lamb Thursday. Arrange a training course for you tomorrow. Du Nuoc Tin was immediately happy like crazy. With a triumphant look on her face, she glanced at me. I bowed my head and sighed deeply. She really didn't know what she was about to face. On the first day of the training course, Du Nuoc Tin burst into tears again, staring at the books piled so high that he couldn't even see the top of them even when standing in glasses. Bored, she sweated profusely. Uncle Tran stood to the side, still calm as if nothing had happened. Miss, starting today, you will be invited to specialized training classes with top tutors in every field. Du Nuoc Tin tried to stay calm. So what is my study program like? Uncle Tran gave a faint smile. It's all based on the master's program. It's just that he started at 3 years old. His progress may be a little faster than yours, but you don't need to worry. We've built an accelerated learning path to help you keep up with the progress. Hearing this, Du Nuoc Tin's face turned pale. Mr. Tran continued reading the list of today's learning content: financial management, market analysis, investment planning. The list wasn't over yet. Du Nuoc Tin couldn't stand it anymore. She trembled, tears threatened to fall from her lips, but still stubbornly maintained a bit of perseverance. Finally, why do I have to study astronomy? Uncle Tran smiled. Not only that, you also have to learn housework. Uncle Tran nodded. That the family's children must be proficient in all fields. Hearing this, Du Nuoc Tin completely collapsed. She was angry, pointed at me, and exclaimed, But what about her? She didn't do anything. At this time, I was still holding a bag of potato chips, sitting on the sofa, eyes glued to the screen, intently watching TV series. Hearing her words, I blinked and looked up, facing Du Nuoc Tin's angry eyes. Then, calmly replied, I told you, I only live to eat and wait to die. Du Nuoc Tin's face immediately turned black, like pig liver. From that day, Du Nuoc Tin officially entered hell. 5 a.m., forced to teach finance. 12 p.m. still trying to complete homework. At first, she dared to complain, but after a few days, she didn't even have the strength to speak. Before, she pleaded that she would only see me every day, but now it's fine. She met all kinds of teachers, but never saw me again. The end of the whole incident was that Du Nuoc Tin collapsed from exhaustion and broke his ribs for the second time. She lay on the bed, her face pale, her breathing as weak as a candle in the wind. I kindly stood next to him and comforted him. There's nothing you can't give up. Du Nuoc Tin turned her head to look at me, her eyes filled with hatred. I was silent for a moment, then took out a package of spicy snacks and held it in front of her. She burst into tears from emotion, just from scratching her ribs. She couldn't say anything. She could only lie there, her chest heaving violently, making a huffing sound as if her throat was blocked. I held the package of snacks, and started to feel tired. Just as I was thinking about whether or not I should withdraw my hand, my brother appeared immediately. Du Nuoc Tin's watery eyes flashed, tears falling like rain, appearing as weak and pitiful as possible. Second brother. But my brother didn't even glance at her. With both hands in his pockets, his tone was cold. If you want to wear the crown, you must be able to bear its weight. She was speechless. I looked at her desperate expression, couldn't help but coughed softly, breaking the atmosphere. When did you come back? My brother glanced at me and replied briefly, just finished. I understood immediately, but my face was still full of rejection. I pretended to hold my stomach, intending to find an excuse, but before I could execute my plan, my brother coldly interrupted. The number of your ranking matches. My face immediately stiffened. I use myself, but what should I do? Even if I don't want to, my brother has given the order, and as a sister, I can't resist. I turned on my phone in desperation, my hands trembling, and opened the game, H of Kings. As soon as I opened the game, another voice interrupted. Brother, are you playing games? I'm playing too, take me along. I was shocked, raised my head in disbelief, and looked at Du Nuoc Tin. No, if I could stop her, it was too late. She opened the game, her eyes were bright, proudly boasting. Big brother, I'm a national player. I'm a great knife player, I can definitely handle it. My heart clenched the edge of the phone, my fingers trembling slightly. Neither my brother nor I spoke, but immediately, Du Nuoc Tin's eyes turned red again. Her voice began to choke. You are also my sister. Even though we didn't grow up together, blood is still blood. Can you not push me out? My heart suddenly felt complicated. 2 hours later, having lost in matches in a row, I did not waver because I was so used to this. After many years of being with my brother, I understood him deeply to the core. My brother looks cold and unapproachable, but is actually so cold that he cannot communicate. He possesses outstanding natural talent. All of his skill points seem to have increased by 10 times compared to a normal person. But the problem is that half of those points are all spent on poison skills and especially extremely bad luck. He's not bad at playing the game. His technique is great, his movements are smooth, his actions are delicate, but every time he starts talking, the whole team immediately collapses. Teammate AFK, being cursed gives the opponent a free life. His catchphrase is, "You lack love, I can give it to you, but there's no need to be so filial to the enemy's heart. Drop a handful of rice on the screen, and the chicken will move better than you." My arm is paralyzed on one side, or all 4 limbs are playing with knives and dancing on my ancestors' graves. On the screen, Du Nuoc Tin was cursed to the point of losing direction, spinning around in place, looking for his way back to the base. My brother coldly glanced at her. Du Nuoc Tin turned pale. I looked at the clock and quickly left the room. You already cursed her, don't you need to curse me anymore? I know recently Du Nuoc Tin has been trying to please the whole family, but unfortunately, everything has failed. She texted my mom. Mom, your new movie is really amazing. I wrote a 30 analysis. 000 words about mother's character are only filled with the most glorious moments. The next day, this article was used as an attack document by Thien. My mother was stoned on hot posts. Her image completely collapsed. She helped my father arrange the study room and enthusiastically reported, Dad, I've been very diligent lately, reading your documents every day. I've helped you clean up all the unnecessary papers. The next day, several important projects of my father collapsed due to lack of important data. She wanted to please my brother and personally went to the kitchen to make lunch. As a result, the dish she cooked was mango milk rice, and my brother was allergic to all 3 of these things. As a result, he was taken straight to the hospital by ambulance. My father couldn't bear it anymore and asked directly, when will the results of the assessment be available? My mother sighed. It's only been a month and 15 days. My brother coldly continued, I don't think I can be killed that easily. I suddenly felt a profound enlightenment. Perhaps the nurse gave the wrong child that year, not because she wanted to protect Du Nuoc Tin, but to save the remaining 3 people in the family. After many failures, my family finally came to a decision. Regardless of the assessment results, we will let Du Nuoc Tin study abroad, in Argentina, one of the countries furthest from China. That day, Du Nuoc Tin cried bitterly. She pointed straight at me, chokingly. What about her? Why don't you chase her away? My parents and brother were silent at the same time. My mother spoke first, her face full of confusion. Why do we have to chase in away? My father frowned. The household registration is still the family's. My brother curled his lips and smiled coldly. The family can afford to raise her. I was deeply moved. Up until now, I always thought I was not suitable for this family, but right now, when they chose me without hesitation, it was like a warm stream flowed through my heart. Tears were almost coming out of my eyes. It turns out that my brother's bad mouth was inherited from his mother, but Thien could not bear it. She gritted her teeth and pointed straight at me. No, you have to choose one of the two. Otherwise, I will cut ties with this family. My father calmly said, Who are you threatening? My mother raised her eyebrows. We broke off the relationship. Can you still be my model? My brother smiled faintly. At least one less person is fighting over property. The atmosphere suddenly became quiet. Thien stiffened in place. She seems to have never thought about this scenario. Logically speaking, when she said those words, my parents must have been heartbroken, panicked, and at least had to fall into an awkward situation. But only I understand the reality of this family. The family is a wealthy family. Blood relationship is never the most important thing. In order to climb to this position, my father did not hesitate to count on his own younger brother. My brother and I grew up in the family for 18 years, but we saw the nanny more times than we saw our parents. In their hearts, career is more important than anything. Therefore, I can only say Thien is too naive. And now, she is the clown in this play. Right now, a call from the testing center saved her. DNA testing results are available. My parents quickly got in the car to get the results. My brother also went with me. I felt a sense of confidence rising, so I decided to share a car with Thien. But I didn't expect this kindness to lead to disaster. We were kidnapped. When we were kidnapped, both Thien and I were dumbfounded. But what surprised me was not that Vaughn kidnapped me, but that a woman over 50 years old could use a kitchen counter to defeat more than 20 bodyguards of the family. I rolled my eyes. Aunt Vaughn. Aunt Vaughn paused, looked at me with complicated eyes, then said in a low voice, Miss, sorry, I was just following orders. Don't blame me. I was silent. Aunt Vaughn and I have known each other for many years. Since I was 10 years old, the two of us cooperated to run away from my brother, but were eventually captured. I looked at Aunt Vaughn and asked, Did you betray me? Aunt Vaughn stiffened, bit her lip, her voice choked. I have to hide my strength. Betrayal will lead to hell. Thien struggled. Are you too crazy? Is now the time to talk about this? Aunt Vaughn looked at her. Her face suddenly turned cold, gritted her teeth, and said, That year, Thien killed the man I love. I swore to take revenge on him. Thien was stunned. I was also stunned. Aunt Vaughn continued, her eyes filled with hatred. So I exchanged his child with my lover's child. I have waited so many years to reveal this secret, causing the family to suffer. The space fell into silence. For the first time in my life, Thien and I had the same thought. What is this all about? She took revenge by becoming her enemy's nanny, then exchanging his child, and then waiting more than a decade to reveal the truth? What's the plan? I opened my mouth to say something, but didn't know where to start. I quietly looked at Aunt Vaughn and slowly asked, Do you feel at all that you are taking revenge? Aunt Vaughn was stunned. I lowered my voice, emphasizing each word. Is there a little feeling of satisfaction? Just a little bit. A tiny glimmer. A tiny drop. Aunt Vaughn went crazy. She screamed. I didn't expect that a family to be so insensitive. So today, I have to let you both die. The air fell silent for 3 seconds. I carefully spoke up. Aren't I the biological daughter of your lover? Aunt Vaughn stood still. At that moment, my parents and older brother appeared. They didn't come alone. Uncle Tran also came. Aunt Vaughn gritted her teeth, glared at them, clutching the bomb controller in her hand. Don't come here. They all have bombs on them. If anyone dares to come close, I will blow up the whole house. My father frowned, his voice cold. You did all this just because I killed your younger brother? Aunt Vaughn clenched her hands, her eyes filled with hatred. That's right. If it wasn't for you, Contrake wouldn't have gone on that fateful flight. My father calmly said, You want revenge on Contrake's behalf? Aunt Vaughn gritted her teeth. Yes, I exchanged porridge for your child, making you raise Contrake's daughter for 18 years. Now, I want to see you suffer. I want to see the whole to family ruined. My mother was angry. Oh my God, my daughter is our biological granddaughter? The air became choking. My father was silent for a moment, then stared at Aunt Vong and coldly asked, "So what?" Aunt Vong was stunned. My mother is still in shock. My brother crossed his arms, his tone bland. So what's the point? From beginning to end, my sister is still my sister. Aunt Vong was speechless. She had not predicted this scenario. In her eyes, this truth should have ruined the entire family. But as a result, they were completely indifferent. No one felt pain. No one felt loss. No one had any strong reactions. My father faintly nodded. That's good. It doesn't have to be exchanged. My mother clapped her hands. Then there's no need to do the paperwork again, right? My brother coldly looked at Aunt Vong. After 18 years of effort, the result did not change anything. Aunt Vong collapsed completely. It was impossible. I do not believe. Just as she was about to press the detonation button, a low voice rang out. Vong Tin, look at me. The whole room suddenly fell silent. Aunt Vong was shocked. Her eyes opened wide as if she couldn't believe her ears. To Contrake. The person she thought had died a long time ago was standing right in front of her. My whole world turned completely upside down. My parents are not my parents. My brother is not my brother. Aunt Vong is not a nanny. Uncle Tran is not a housekeeper. Uncle Tran is actually my father's younger brother, to Contrake, who should have died a long time ago. I was stunned, staring at Uncle Tran's real face, more handsome than my father. I lost all courage to step closer. Anyway, the beauty difference is too obvious. I took a deep breath and asked in a hoarse voice, "So I'm your daughter?" To Contrake replied faintly, "No, I am Thien's daughter." I was shocked. My brother pulled out the DNA test results from his pocket and slowly passed them in front of me and Du Nuoc Tin. On the paper, it clearly states that the DNA similarity rate between me and my father is 99.95%. My brother looked at me indifferently and coldly said, "You are my biological sister." His eyes glanced over at me, his tone still full of disgust, even if it was a little incompetent. I was silent, even though I knew it was normal for my brother to be rude, but being slapped in the face right in a match like this, I still couldn't help but feel slightly hurt. Aunt Vong was stunned, unable to. Didn't I exchange two children? Isn't Uncle Tran called second uncle? Uncle Tran slowly spoke, but you forgot one thing. After you changed the two children, I quietly changed them again. Aunt Vong asked, "What?" Du Nuoc Tin what? Uncle Tran said, "It turns out that right after Aunt Vong switched the two babies, second uncle secretly changed them, so that Du Nuoc Tin and I returned to our original positions, and he was silent for many years just to protect this secret." Du Nuoc Tin's eyes widened in disbelief. "So, I am your biological daughter?" The second uncle slightly frowned and sighed. "No, you are not my daughter either." Du Nuoc Tin was stunned. Her face stiffened. Second uncle slowly said, "Your mother had an affair a long time ago. When I faked her death, she lied that you were my daughter to get the inheritance. So I don't know whose child you are. But if you want, I can adopt you." The atmosphere was as quiet as paper. Du Nuoc Tin seemed to have been hit with an acupuncture point, standing still, her lips trembling, her face as white as paper. She absolutely cannot accept this fact. After a while, I couldn't bear it anymore, gently patted her shoulder and comforted her in a soft voice. "If you want to cry, just cry." Ho ho. She cried like the sky was falling. After that, Aunt Vong was taken away by her second uncle, and Du Nuoc Tin finally agreed to study abroad. She flew to Argentina, leaving the family forever, and I still continue my idle life as before. However, the atmosphere in the house has changed. My father no longer goes on business trips all day, and my mother no longer stays in hotels too much. My brother moved from the dormitory to home. Even though my Aunt Vong and my second uncle were missing, I had my three most important people. My dad even organized a family camping trip. I asked confusedly, "Actually, there's no need to come back and live with me." My brother replied indifferently, "We've thought about it again. It seems like we haven't given you a feeling of safety before." I smiled. "Actually, I'm fine." My brother shook his head. "Don't think I don't know. Before the results of the assessment, you were already preparing to pack your bags to leave." I stood still. I silently swallowed my saliva, staring at them. "Everyone knows?" My mother turned to look at me, her eyes as gentle as I had ever seen. Actually, from the beginning, I didn't doubt you. No matter how normal you are, in my heart, you are still my daughter. My heart trembled. Since Du Nuoc Tin appeared, I always thought that I was fake, always believed that I did not belong to this family. They are all brilliant like swans, and I am just an ugly duckling. I thought that one day, I would be pushed out and would have to return everything that belonged to her. But it turns out, from the beginning, they never thought of throwing me away. Suddenly, I felt a sting in my nose. I was just about to say something when my father calmly said, "Anyway, the family's ancestral graves can't smoke forever." At that moment, my heart died again.